It is 3 o'clock and this meeting will come to order. First thing is a roll call, and our trustees, except for trustee Blank, are here. She messaged that she would not be able to make it. And our treasurer may make it before we end at 4 o'clock. So next is our legal report by counsel.
I think this first bullet point, financial management policy, it's on you. Closer. Okay. It has to do with the process of engaging new insurance. So feel free to step in anytime, any trustee. So the two main provisions here that govern this, they're contained in Idaho Code 332720. And this is under subparagraph G, it's 1G. The Board of Trustees has the following powers and duties: to acquire, purchase, devise, lease, or otherwise, and to own and hold real and personal property, and to construct buildings for the use and purposes of the library district, and to sell, exchange, or otherwise dispose of property, real or personal, when no longer required by the district, and to ensure the real and personal property of the district. And then in the financial management policy, that was board approved August 17, 2023, under contracting, the paragraph states that the district has authority to enter into contracts that provide goods or services. The Board of Trustees delegate to the library director the authority to contract on behalf of the library for the purchase of goods or services when the annual aggregate amount of the contract is $50,000 or lesser value, and said purchases are pursuant to a budget previously approved by the board, except for legal services. New contracts committing the library to amounts in excess of $50,000 annually shall be approved by specific action of the board in formal session. And then there's another sentence: ongoing annual contracts such as health insurance are exempt from the $50,000 requirement. So it's not entirely clear, based upon the statute and the policy, what's delegated and who runs point. Typically, the director will take on gathering quotes and presenting a proposal to the board, and the board can approve it. That does have some support in the policy here, where it says that the library is delegating certain authority to the director, and then it is pursuant to a budget previously approved, and then also that new contracts should be approved by a specific action of the board. So although the statute would allow for the trustees to go out and appoint one of them to gather quotes and present quotes to the board, typically that is not what happens. The director would do that. The district can be involved in choosing that and should, and they should sign it according to statute, which requires counter signatures. And so one thing that might help is maybe a tweak to the financial management policy if we want to clarify how we proceed. Maybe the director shall gather quotes and present to the board, or whatever you guys want to see. But I think the director's not entirely clear on where the responsibility lies to gather this information and present it. But my recommendation would be that the director would gather probably 3 quotes at least, and then we could do a coverage analysis, the pros and cons, get you an apples to apples comparison, and then the board could ask questions and either approve or not approve the director's recommendation. Anything else on that one?
I would just say that there's some language in the job description as well that talks about recommends library policy services and fiscal activities to the board. So usually it comes to the board as a recommendation. And then I would also say that I would recommend, since this is now the second topic in 8 months, that the board consider adding some information to the financial management policy, or a separate policy that looks at the request for qualifications proposal for purchasing. And there's some language that I saw on the NIC site that I liked, but I think what I liked about this is that it says the RFP, RFQ objectively evaluates all individuals and firms who may consider themselves qualified. It becomes a public essentially for public review once it's received. And so it outlines some great language. So I would recommend that in these professional services that we do take a more public and transparent and equitable approach. And they use some language, and again, I'm going to cite them, but it says that it does talk about the laws for purchasing aren't going to require it. But in this case, they recommend anything over $50,000. But because the library is a publicly funded institution, it's imperative that contracts for services be awarded on objective evaluation criteria. And so I think that's excellent language that I would recommend that we consider as well.
Response?
I would just say there's two things in my mind on this is, the Idaho statute that was read ultimately gives the buck stops here responsibility to the trustees. We are underinsured, and we've been underinsured since October 1st. And we've been waiting for multiple or any quotes. I would appreciate it if we could get updated on multiple quotes that are on the way. It's appeared like we were getting the one and only quote we were going to get. That's why I wanted to do something, a special meeting before it expired, the quote expired. And the second thing is, the NIC, my understanding is NIC has policies that require RFQ. We don't have a policy that requires RFQ for these contracts. I guess we could add it, but we don't have it now. So, comparing to NIC isn't really pertinent. It might be something we want to do, but so I guess my closing comment on that is just please get us 3 quotes if you can get them. Go get them. I've said that from the beginning down at Harrison, I think, and I'm not looking for just one. I'm looking for anything because I have a duty as a trustee to get us fully insured, and we're not.
Jeffrey?
I would just characterize the statute as identifying that the Board of Trustees is responsible for financial oversight. It becomes pretty clear that once a budget is adopted, the operating spending and allocation falls to the director. And so that's a real line that I don't know is fully understood. I would also characterize the 40-year history of the library district as that responsibility falling to the director. And again, the language in this, and I'm happy to present it at a future time, it talks about preferences and exceptions, but I think the meat of it is that we want it to be fair, we want it to be equitable, we want it to be based on objective criteria, and I'm not sure with the process so far that we've achieved that. I would also say that this board has given insufficient direction in terms of time frame. If you recall a meeting that we had, one trustee said April was a good time. One person said right now. Some people said not at all. And so for a director and staff to move forward, we have to have a majority of the board. And so again, happy to get quotes, happy to go through a fair and objective process, but it needs to be clear direction from the majority of the board. And again, I don't know what time frame, and then all of a sudden we had a quote come in and then a rush. And this does not qualify under the statute as an emergency. So we have coverage, I understand, and I'm hearing your concern about not enough. But again, I want to make sure that we're doing it and effective and efficient and transparent based on objective criteria.
Mr. Robinson?
Well, we're still in legal report, and on this first bullet, I believe. So could I hear from the attorney on what was just said? Is it the board is responsible for the budgetary number, and the director is responsible to disperse that in the outside world as she sees fit?
Well, I would bring you back to 2 statutes. The one of the procurement statute, which exempts insurance from any type of bidding process. It's still the policy of the state of Idaho to have a transparent process and to endeavor to have, you know, significant Idaho economic impact on any of the service providers. But procurement of insurance is exempted from all the provisions of the bidding statute. And then the other main statutory term is 332721G, which gives the power and duty to the Board of Trustees to insure the real and personal property of the district. That doesn't mean that they have to directly insure it, but they have to initiate a process whereby that will get done. And typically what that means is provide a budget for it, give the director the direction, receive bids, have a collaborative process, receive a recommendation, and approve or deny a recommendation. Is that an adequate answer to the question?
It is,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, so that was the 10 minutes that was allotted
yeah.
to legal counsel. Do you have anything else that you? need to
Well,
give?
we don't have the necessary policy provision information. We need to do a coverage analysis. I'm happy to do that. I think we have a pretty good grasp on what our previous ICRIP coverage was, what our current 2 sets of coverages provide, and then what's being proposed. And so as soon as we get those policy provisions, we could do an apples to apples comparison. But right now we do lack some of that necessary information.
Sure.
Quickly,
Can I ask for a majority consensus clarification agreement from the board to ask the library director to go out and get quotes now? Just a consensus so that it's clear to her. We're not waiting till April. I'd like to do it as soon as we can.
maybe we could do that under the insurance policies section.
Okay.
Is that what you're, okay. All right. So then, have anything else that we have?
Operations and all.
I'm not exactly sure what that one, I thought the 332720 was related to the insurance, but we can talk about that if you want. Is there some specific?
Or after the next session, it's.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, then moving on to the discussion to review post halls and Athol library, continuity of operations plans. Trustee Henry?
Yeah, I'd like to state that I think more logically when I'm writing rather than speaking extemporaneously. So I prepared some written remarks. And I'm a better writer than I am a reader sometimes, so you'll have to bear with me as I go through this. The community library network recently sustained 2 major building facilities emergencies. The first occurred at the Post Falls Library on Sunday, January 14th at 11:43 a.m. The second at the Athol Library on January 16th. The library was informed about these two the public was informed about these 2 burst pipe and flooding incidents via press releases on January 18th and 31st. During the February 1st Board of Trustees meeting, library staff layoffs and/or reduction in force were briefly touched upon by the director. All board members provided assurances that any type of layoffs, RIFs, or furloughs would be viewed as temporary should it be a shortage of meaningful work for staff. It would not be used as some type of tool to permanently reduce staffing. The director informed the board that the appropriate process regarding staff would be to consult with legal and that it would be possible to discuss plans with the board minus confidentiality, personnel related and attorney privilege discussion. Immediately following this meeting, the board toured the Post Falls facility. We were informed the insurance adjusters were very busy and it would be about a month before they assessed CLN's damage. We were also informed it might cost as much as $1 million to temporarily remove all the books from the library. And I'm assuming that figure includes fixtures, for example, bookshelves and furniture. I don't know that. This is as much information as the board received following the CLN's greatest loss to a facility or services in a network's 40+ year history, almost a month after the incidents. The following is not a chastisement, nor is it an admonishment of staff. This is from an elected official speaking as a representative of the public. Over the past week, I have had a number of constituents and taxpayers ask me, so Tom, what's going on with the library? And sheepishly, I had to reply, I don't know anything more than you do. And that's not something I think they should hear from one of their elected officials. I therefore decided to review Idaho's statutory authority, and in accordance with Idaho 332720, which is the powers and duties of the Board of Trustees, letter O, it reads, to exercise other powers not inconsistent with law necessary for the effective use and management of the library. At a glance, glancing at the CLN's library trustee job description under examples of work, it reads, responds to requests for information or services from the general public, represents the district to the public, and ensures the district has adequate resources to provide its services. Not hearing any contingency vision for the Post Falls and Athol libraries, I decided to brainstorm with myself. And I envisioned two primary options. Leave both facilities fully closed for restoration, initiating temporary reductions in staff, offering no alternative services until the work is complete, or offer creative alternative services to the public during these anticipated prolonged closures. At first, I thought, well, why not employ our underutilized bookmobile or discovery bus? But then I recalled they both had significant costly mechanical problems, and in addition, they come along with their own challenges. Shifting my focus to the library that I'm most familiar with, which is Post Falls, the idea of providing limited services appears viable. The flooding does not appear to have affected the main conference rooms in that vicinity. The main conference rooms, the offices in that vicinity, the Twice Told Tales area, and the restrooms. Cumulatively, I guess the unscathed area might comprise 20% of the building, which might be bigger than the Harrison Library or the Athol Library. I really don't know, but it's a significant, sizable area. We could provide, in my opinion, an enhanced COVID-style service. You cordon off the main library area to the right of the entry area, vacate the contents of the Twice Told areas, the Twice Told Tales area, staff the area, encourage patrons to order materials via the CIN and stage them there, skip the curbside service that we offer during COVID, and patrons will be permitted to enter the facility. Inside and outside drop-off service could be restored. Right now, it's not open for drop-offs either. The sizable conference rooms could be used for scheduled programs and/or well-stocked bookshelves. Plastic sheeting and the existing security barrier could be used to segregate the flood restoration area. The HVAC system could likely be adjusted to mechanically isolate the restoration and the unscathed areas. The most popular and undamaged books could be relocated to alternate libraries, and the balance could be boxed up and put into storage. Staff and community volunteers could be used for this book transfer project. It's books, they can move them. There may not be a need to hire a contractor to move the books, in my opinion, just a guess. We could increase courier service using staff to support new limited operations. Other staff could be used to assist with the increased business at our neighboring CLN libraries. I think continued book acquisitions should be dramatically curtailed during this closure period, as there would be no place to shelve them. I think there needs to be a significant increase in communications with the public, particularly patrons. Even if it's not a finalized plan, in the spirit of transparency, keep them abreast of the developments and options being considered. Perhaps even solicit input from the public. I can't speak for what the continuity of operations might, what type of continuity of operations might be available for Athol, as that's the only CLN library I have not yet visited. But renting or leasing a local facility might be a good option. I would have considered renting or leasing a local storefront or qualifying facility for Post Falls. However, I don't know that this option would be covered by existing insurance. Using our existing facility should cost the district or the insurance company nothing. There are other considerations regarding staffing. property taxes in the budget, but I'll leave that to another trustee. Executing some of the ideas I've outlined above will provide the public with some services during the anticipated lengthy facilities restoration while keeping CLN staff gainfully employed. To repeat from my earlier statement, this is not an admonishment of staff. In addition to staff's continuity of operations plan, I'll ask my most important question of all. What is it that the director needs from this board to move forward on behalf of patrons, taxpayers, CLN employees with regard to the Post Falls and Athol Library's current closures?
Sure.
Trustee Boss?
After the tour that we had last week, I guess it was, a lot more questions started coming to my mind that I couldn't bring up at the meeting. I wrote up a little outline I would want to go through real quick. You can pass it around so you got it. I'm concerned, I don't know if we have any emergency preparedness plan for the district, and I'll take the answer when I get finished here, but if we don't have any emergency procedures. You need more?
Yeah.
That's one more, please.
I would expect that the district would have an emergency procedures policy for things like, what do you do for extended power outage, deep snow on the roof? We've got the sub-zero temperature for extended times. That could be things like remove ceiling tiles or add temperature sensors. What if we have high winds, a tornado come through, windstorm, ice storm? We've had that before with freezing rain building up. What if there's a terrorism attack, armed robbery, a hostage situation, on-site active shooter? I think all of this there should be checklists and a procedure that you go to know what to do. And so if there isn't such a policy, or if it's already sufficient or not, or if it's insufficient, I would request the board majority ask for a policy to be created. And to me, this would be the facilities manager creating checklists for these emergency situations and maybe others. And the library director can work it into a policy, submit the policy to the board for review, discussion, and approval. Moving on what has happened, I would like a report to the board on what actually happened. I'd like pictures of the actual pipes that broke, pictures of the damage. There must be some around, but maybe not all the items that are being tossed out, but which are the things that are the damaged walls, the damaged ceilings, the damage from the water. I'd like it itemized. I'd like a summary report. And I've had numerous, or at least 3 or 4 constituents write in this last week and send me pictures of materials being discarded. They appear to be in good shape. I don't know. I'm not questioning why they were thrown out, but I am wondering, is CLN able to replace each of the items that are being thrown out? There's lots of CDs that are being thrown out. Can we buy them again? Or are we throwing out? We have to go to eBay and buy them or something. A lot of these CDs, and I've seen books and pictures they've taken appear to be undamaged. It seems like maybe you could just wipe them down with anti-mold cleaner or something, and they would be fine. It doesn't appear they were submerged in water. So I would like to know, what is the plan to replace the discarded items if they're no longer available? And I'm also concerned that if insurance is going to replace all of these, we did see the documentation, sample documentation, each item's taken a picture, have a picture taken and put in a little report. Are all these things that are being thrown out, are they going to exceed our CLN insurance costs. Before we throw them out, if they're usable, let's try not to hit insurance so hard, because we're gonna have to pay for that with increased insurance premiums. The other things I'm concerned about that I thought about is taxpayers are paying their taxes this year for all the facilities, but poor Post Falls people are now gonna have to travel to Hayden or Rathdrum or Coeur d'Alene or Liberty Lake for maybe 6 months. Or if they want to, they can't even do order online and go pick it up. And Athol's probably gonna have to drive to Spirit Lake. I don't know if it's 6 months, but taxpayers should be provided an option, a local option to take care of them locally, because they've got extra time and expense and all their traveling. So as Trustee Handley named off some options, I would like to see that done so they don't have to add the extra time and expense. If we simply can't do it, and I don't know what contractors and insurance are saying, if we simply can't do it, then by rights, CLN, the district should compensate taxpayers with lower taxes next year, because they're paying full price with their taxes and they're not getting the service. So lower taxes would seem to me, I mean, we can't lower them this year, but we could next year. And how would that be funded? Well, with the reduced expenses we have. And maybe that's payroll reduction, maybe that's other operating expenses. But that's why I really request that we look really hard at trying to open the libraries somehow, so that we don't have to do a layoff. Trustee Hanley mentioned some of it. It seems to me like you could get the contractors to seal off all the way up to the mezzanine, take the false ceiling out, seal off with plastic sheets down to the floor, have exhaust air blowing out that reduces the air pressure so air doesn't leak back into the rest of the library. So make it a low pressure area. The contractors could work this out. I'm sure I've seen it done before. Maybe it could just be the children's area sealed off during the construction in that area, just pick sections at a time where the construction is. But the idea that you could somehow or other close off the west wing and open up the east wing, put some bookshelves in there and those meeting rooms, maybe put them closer together and have reduced adult sections and minor sections, maybe set up a children's in one of the smaller rooms, put checkout tables or counters out by the fountain, keep the restrooms open, and then provide online order and pick up from both Post Falls and Athol, and just eliminate the meeting programs at those libraries during the construction time. Those are my thoughts, and I guess I'd open up for discussion, but I would like to get the board to request emergency preparedness plan.
Trustee Robinson?
Emergency preparedness plans sound wonderful. I'm not sure if, I mean, I know that there are some already, because we've talked about the safe rooms at the different branches. And in fact, a few months ago, we talked about that in, what branch doesn't have one yet? Okay, that's what I thought. And I don't know if you remember, or trustees remember talking about that. And at that time, I think there was pushback on the fact that we even needed those, but yes, that is important. And I don't know what plans we have in place already. Number 3, the documentation of facility damage. I would assume that the insurance companies are going through and taking lots of pictures. And I would assume that we could, as a board, eventually get access to those. I would assume That's probably gonna take a while, though. Obviously, it'd be great if we can set up temporary service in the Post Falls area. It just kind of, it's unfortunate for the people of Post Falls. But there are people in the county that on a regular basis have to drive very far to whatever library they are at. So, and I'm not trying to like say, ha ha, Post Falls, but there's people that every day of their life, if they want to go to the library, they have to drive more than 7 miles, and from Post Falls to Coeur d'Alene is 7 miles, you know, city to city on the freeway. I certainly don't think that the taxpayers would be thinking, give us money back since this tragedy happened. I wouldn't think that. So yeah, I mean, I agree. If there's a way, and I would assume that staff is actually trying to think of ways, and I think both trustees gave some really good ideas. Some I'm sure the director's already been thinking of, and some maybe she's like, wow, that's a great idea. So that's, I guess, all I have to say on that. But yeah, some good ideas, and it'd be wonderful if we could get through this smoothly as possible. And if there is something in the future that can help something like this from not happening, of course, we all want to see that. Thank you.
Director?
Sure. So I guess I would just point out that we've had 20 minutes of board comment. That is more than this board has given me in the last month to talk about this great tragedy. So while I am open to communicating more, this board is required really, in order for me to do that, to give me time on the agenda. The January meeting, I had 10 minutes to do the director report, half of which included other items. There was not an action by the board to give more time on the agenda. I really think that was a missed opportunity. There's a couple things that kind of I'm reflecting on. One, I truly do understand the difficult position that trustees are put in, being asked questions by the community. And let me just set a real expectation. I would expect 75% of their questions you should be able to answer, but there is still going to be a remaining 25% that is an operational question that by the policies and by the statute, those come to the director. So I would just, I guess for our newer trustees who don't have that broad experience and depth of experience to recognize, please send them my way. If I can answer, I'm happy to. And I know some of the board has received comments from the public, and I have responded to those. So no, I am doing that. I think the ideas that we had talked about here, those are all ones that staff have explored, and staff have explored many other options as well. I think the word that I would use would be premature. It's premature to talk about what we're exploring until we can get a little bit more information. So, and the question about how the board can support the director. At that January meeting, I mentioned that administrative staff workload is considerable right now, and the board needs to prioritize agenda topics, and I may need to request special meetings for any special board authorization or utilize emails to keep the board informed. I have that same expectation for the board. If you have questions, it is perfectly acceptable to ask me those questions and for me to respond back. So specifically questions about materials that are being discarded. I would just point out, and I'll say this for the public as well, that and I know Trustee Hanley talked about his extensive facility experience. I don't know if he wants to talk about black water and fire extinguisher systems. Yeah, if you want to. I'm just giving him an opportunity to explain. Yes.
Okay, but this is also your opportunity.
Yeah,
so
well, and like I
maybe
said,
you can do that after you're finished, or?
well, I think it's important to identify the public health risk for materials and for items that have been damaged. And while, again, it's difficult to say when you're diving in a dumpster and going through bags what exactly you can see and not see. However, I'm going to call the water and let Trustee Hanley maybe define it later, but I like to call it chunky water. Anything that's stagnant, anything that is full of bacteria, and it's not something that I would want to handle without gloves, that has an odor, materials like that. So I understand when people don't know the definition, or this was not spring water or tap water that came in to the facility and directly made contact with these items. So in terms of where we're at, let me step back and talk about what I know today. The next step in the process is moving contents out of our two facilities. I did mention that the first review was a quote, not in writing, but a verbal quote that was quite eye-popping. The statement that the removal of contents could be in excess of what the repair of the damaged facility could be. So I don't have that experience, but that was shocking to me. Since then, we have been walking through other contractors and facilitators that may be able to assist in removing the items. And we're putting together a staff proposal where, in combination with a contractor or in partnership, where we provide owner-provided items. So all of those items about moving items, that's all currently being done. And I will say it's a tremendous amount of work. I toured a contractor this morning. I toured a contractor at 2. I toured a contractor on Monday. I have another appointment tomorrow. So in terms of workload, we are doing everything we can and using a ton of resources in order to get this done. I cannot make a contractor put together a quote any faster. Again, Monday to Thursday, I think is pretty good when you're talking about removing 100,000 items from 2 different facilities. There's a lot of detail that goes into that. And so we are looking at that. We do not have an understanding yet of which direction we'll go. In terms of making commitments about public service, I can only predict right now about 2 weeks out where staff are going to be assigned as a resource. So as we mentioned, if library staff are moving books and putting books back on the shelf, it would make it much more difficult for us to be able to open up again 2 service points. And so it may be reduced hours. It may be a combination of things. If we can fully outsource this content removal, then we can explore other options sooner. But that is definitely a key factor, knowing who's going to move the contents, where they're going to be stored, and if that's within our insurance budget. The next step is really been in the hands of our legal counsel about moving forward. If it's an emergency procurement bidding, and I don't know if council wants to comment on that now, but I think if the library goes through a request for bid, or request for quotes and goes through a bid process, that would likely add 4 to 6 weeks to our timeline of closure. And so I am waiting on the opinion of legal. And so once we make that determination, then we can either put it out for bid, and then we can start talking about demolition and restoration work. At this point, I've already kind of highlighted that the extent of the damage is unknown. I cannot make any reasonably accurate statement as to how long the closures will be. If Post Falls is closed for a year, then I think that would trigger our response to look for longer term service options that are more permanent. If the Athol library closure can be done in 3 or 4 months, then perhaps we have a very small scaled down version. The Athol library as well, I've already talked to one contractor about the feasibility of making the front. So when you go in, there's bathrooms, lobby, and meeting room, making that portion restored faster or first, prioritizing that in the construction timeline, so that we can offer pickup of holds, story times. I agree with the conversation that Trustee Henley had made. Staff are, of course, looking at how we can best utilize the meeting space. It's not known right now whether or not we need that for storage, if we're going to need it for other things, but service is a priority. It always has been. So I think just to, what I've been telling staff and what I've been telling people that contact me is, I may not be able to tell you an answer. I may not have the information. I may not be able to make a decision until I receive that information, but I can tell you when I anticipate to receive that information. And so right now, MKA is a firm in Spokane Valley, and they are putting a construction cost estimate together. That was what I was referencing in terms of I'm expecting that in a week or two. And I think a month from February 21st, around that date is when I'm expecting some information. I have no specific information in terms of whether the damage to the facilities or to the contents will be fully covered by insurance. So again, it's premature. In terms of what the board can do to support staff, I think, we've had 2 special meetings. And I'll be very direct in saying that to take this meeting today at this time in the middle of 2 contractors and appointments and working with I took a call from our adjuster this afternoon. Staff are extremely busy. Pick up the phone, send an email. That would be extremely helpful to preserve our time. So again, having insurance shoehorned in the middle of an emergency was not super helpful. So just to be real, asking me to do another policy in the middle of, I think we're on like 5 policies right now that we're reviewing: public comment, director evaluation, selection, withdrawal. We've talked about internet policy, which is statutory required. We need to stop with the paperwork and the specific administrative tasks. I'll point out today that we do not have our business manager. Our business manager is out of the office for approximately 6 weeks or longer. So we have less staff and we need less work. I don't know how else to say that more directly. I would point out to the trustee that was talking about emergency plans. I don't know if you have read our facility management policy. It does have a section that the board has approved under emergency services. And so I would refer the trustee back to that policy as a starting place where maybe some additions could be made. But we do have information on our website about how we handle emergencies and the process for staff. I don't know if there was any more specific questions. Like I said, it's difficult. This is an incredibly challenging time, and I would appreciate the board's support and encouragement and consideration to the staff. This is extremely stressful, and to hear comments that don't quite play in the heads very well. I truly appreciate that the board last week went around and supported the staff. And just for feedback for the board, several staff have commented to me how reassuring that was to them. So what the board could do, please make positive comments. Please support the staff that are working really hard. I'll be honest, pulling books that are moldy and gross off of shelves and processing, not fun work, but they did it. And I'm proud of them for doing it. And so I think more time is needed. I think the board is doing a disservice to themselves and the community by not allowing legal counsel and not allowing staff adequate time. to bring the board up to speed. This is a new board. There's a lot of information that you don't know. It takes more time, and I would rather spend time on that than so many policies. I'd rather try to, again, have a regular business meeting and not extra special meetings at this time.
Trustee Henley?
Just a couple of quick thoughts here. To my knowledge, the library director has not asked for any special meetings, and I don't think we've been kept up to speed. This is a kind of, we'll call it an unprecedented situation, and it requires special handling. And so I don't like the fact that I feel like the board and the public in general are left in the dark. There needs to be a little more communication. It's been a while. This is a big deal. It's going on over 40 years. This hasn't happened before. Now it's happened. I would be very open to delaying any kind of emergency procedural write-ups on tasking until 6 months from now or better, when we're back up in operation and have time. So I think it needs to be done if the facilities policy is not adequate, but I don't see that as an emergency. But I don't understand why we need to delay indefinitely or unknown period getting Post Falls as an example, because it's the large library. I don't see why we can't do something on there. I mean, we have staff. Board can authorize spending more money if necessary for overtime. I don't see why staff, it's not below their dignity. They handle books all day. The books that survived, that didn't get dumped, I don't see why they, running through the CIN at first, find out what books are popular that you want to actually keep available, take them out, send them to whether it's HAYDEN or another library. The remaining books, I don't see why they can't be boxed up. We can rent out a climate controlled storage units. They're not a fortune. It might be $200 to $300 a month at best. So you get 1 or 2 or 3 of those and you line them up. I think we need to improvise, adapt, and overcome. I mean, we've got an emergency, and I won't say an emergency. Emergency's taking place, but we need to restore some kind of operations, in my opinion. And I don't see why. Is the staff still working out of Post Falls? If the chair doesn't mind me asking the director.
I'm good with that.
Post Falls hosts administrative staff and system-wide staff, as well as staff that do the operations of Post Falls. Some staff are still at Post Falls. Some staff have been redeployed to other locations.
Chair?
Trustee Robinson?
First, I want to say, Director, I heard you. I literally just heard what you said, and I appreciate everything that you said. It kills me that our attorney got 10 minutes to speak on 5 bullet points, and we got down to number 1, and that's it. So yet again, our attorney's here for the entire meeting. I'm not sure if he was up in Sandpoint before he came down here for this 1-hour meeting or not for his 10 minutes, but it's absolutely ludicrous that he's even here and doesn't get more than, or doesn't even get through his bullet points. I am certain the staff is doing everything that they can possibly do in this time right now. Dude, I actually had a question before the other trustee was called on a little bit before me. I know, thank you. If I remember right from the original interviews with the now director, there's 2 things that come to mind that kind of play into this situation. One is a complete redo of the library down in Lewiston, where I believe the entire library was gutted and redone. And when the director was in Texas, I believe, if I remember right, the director at that time wasn't the director, maybe assistant director, but was in charge of moving an entire library from one building to another. And I would like to hear the director's response to that, if that is actually, if I'm remembering correctly, and how those two experiences play exactly into what we're doing right now.
Yes, I was actually just trying to quickly find, I was putting together for possible insurance ICRIMP approval, a proposal for staff to conduct the work of moving contents. And I outlined in that I moved 50,000 items from an old facility into a new facility at the Lewiston Library. There we used criminal labor and had a very modified, very small budget in order to do that. And so had to come up with the plan, had to come up with the resources, and then executed that. But I would also highlight our assistant director and our facilities manager. And again, I included their credentials in that as well. I'm just going to speak very humbly, but very directly. This library district is exceptionally blessed right now to have such outstanding, experienced staff to handle this emergency. You could not be in better hands. Any one of the three of us is capable of handling this scale and this size of project. And so I say that pretty directly, but pretty humbly as well. I think it takes understanding of construction and construction administration. I think it takes understanding and experience with relocating libraries. None of these companies that we're looking at have experience moving a size library of Post Falls. So and yet the two of us do. So, I mean, the library is very fortunate that we can offer that expertise to these contractors and give them real world experience in that area as well. I think the reality is, you know, I speak when there is something to say. And my biggest wish is that a trustee had reached out to me and said, do you have any updates for us? Is there anything that you're going to know this week? Or should we wait until next week? Because I find it disrespectful of my time, the other trustees' time, and our staff time. And I could have said, very simply, that we are in a holding pattern until legal counsel tells us if this has to go out to bid. And I have two contractors that are reviewing and giving us a quote on moving materials. And after those two items are decided and a contractor is hired, then I can go into the details that you're talking about. And so I'm again going to say premature, absolutely premature. In terms of communicating with the public and board communication, and I'll give you an example. In a construction project, it's very common to have monthly meetings where you walk through. I'm very familiar with trustees having one representative that's able to not say anything or do anything, but attend and observe to assist staff in communicating with the board. So that's what I'm used to in Lewiston. I'm open to that. But here's the kicker. It's not my meeting. It's not your meeting. It's the contractor's meeting. And the contractor can say there can only be 2 people at the meeting, or they can say we're open to another person at the meeting. I think the board doesn't have an understanding of a full construction project that essentially we turn over the facility to the contractor and it is then under their liability. And so very few contractors will want to be doing concrete sawing while a toddler runs by. They do not have the kind of tort protections that a government agency does. And as again, and council can talk to you about, in a construction project, whose liability if someone gets hurt? Is it ours? Is it theirs? That's not an area that I want to explore by having the public into a construction site. So I'm very aware, very capable, and very much planning and taking feedback from staff, from the board, from community members, from the contractor about the best way to move forward. I move forward with a team approach. I'm happy to include the board. I would be welcoming to a trustee that wants to represent the board and come back and facilitate communication to the full board under the condition that the contractor finds that acceptable. There's much to discuss, but I'm going to say that I really wish that the board and the staff were working on this together rather than spending an hour in the middle of the week when there was very important work to be done. And the full board couldn't even be here.
Trustee Boss?
I would just say in response to some of this, we act as a board when we're together, and it's really difficult to do stuff when it's one-on-one with the library director by emails. I wanted to have a board meeting, and I think it was really important to get our thoughts out and to hear an update. So I think this was totally called for to have a board meeting, because this is how we act as a group in a board. I'm just asking, do all you can from the beginning to open up Post Falls. Put that metal grate up and put plastic all the way up to through the mezzanine and turn that whole side over to the construction. Do all you can to open up Post Falls. Keep the board updated, and please ask the facilities manager to start working on some of these checklists that I suggested. He can do it. I can tell you one thing, right, or a couple things right now, is if we have really cold weather, there's a couple things you should do. Put it down on a checklist, so that if it's not him, somebody else can look at the checklist and make sure it gets done next time. So that's my feedback. Is I wanted to have the meeting, and I think it was important so we can act as a board.
Trustee Hanna?
I have one last, I would like to know when we're going to get a more factual update. Would it be at next week's regular meeting? But I still don't see, and in conjunction with what Trustee Plas said, I don't understand why I see no reasons why, unless I hear otherwise, that Post Falls Library cannot be used in a smaller fashion. Contractors can own everything from that collection desk across. There's already, I think, a metal security gate that goes across. There's a door to get back there. I've worked with contractors for years and years and years as a facilities manager. Contractors are incredibly creative. They know how to play with HVAC systems. They can take windows out. There can be no materials going in and out the front door. They can all be done through the removed window. There are lots of options out there, and I don't see little children running through a contractor zone there while they're working, cutting concrete. And so while I appreciate the amount of workload that's involved in this, I really think that we need to know what our insurance maxims are. And if we're going to be up against those in terms of restoration, then we need to employ staff. We have community people out there, the volunteers. There are a lot of people probably who would love to get inside. Oh, sure, I'll grab all these books and put them in boxes with some direction. There are ways to do these things, and it may be a little premature to have a plan in place, but we're not getting much information. And so that's what's driving this. And to my knowledge, the director has not asked for a meeting in the past to update the board. And I don't think we should individually be asking for updates. I think we need to be given updates as a unit, as a board. So I think I'm probably pressed up against time.
Yeah, actually, time is up for that section. So I think that we should try to put things off if they're not like pressing right now, and reduce some of the stress and the workload.
Sure. Just as a quick one, but it is a question for the director. For this 1 hour meeting, how much time did staff have to take out of their day for this 1 hour meeting?
Actually, I don't, that's not on the agenda, it's not under this section.
We
I don't
earlier
think it-
talked about, the director earlier talked about staff taking out time for meetings, so it is pertinent to this actual discussion.
Okay,
I'll
do you have a
be
quick
quick.
answer? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the board needs to realize that we posted an agenda and then we had to repost an amended agenda. And every time we do that, we have to reprint it and we have to repost it to our website. I would say it probably takes an hour for the work for just posting the agenda for this meeting. Additionally, in this meeting, in this case, there was a trustee, two trustees calling the meeting. There was some confusion and conflict about the items and the amount of time. And so legal actually was CC'd on that email. So there will be a legal expense I anticipate in that as well. Again, it took probably 30 minutes for me to coordinate the agendas of my time. Staff to come and set up the meeting room includes audio, visual, and microphones. I would say that this is about an hour of work in terms of making sure this is set up and then an hour to take down. Additionally, we record our meetings and we take notes and minutes. So it usually takes an hour to 2 hours to download and edit the video, and note taking maybe an hour to edit those and then send those out for review, and then several staff to review. So this 1 hour meeting costs the taxpayers a lot of money. And I would just say, you could have sent an email and I could have replied all.
Okay, so we are moving on to the discussion to review insurance policies, authorize engagement of insurance carriers, or schedule insurance providers presentations at a future meeting.
You need to extend the meeting.
Oh, you're right, thank you.
The motion,
Okay, I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting. 10 minutes.
I move to extend the meeting 10 minutes.
Okay, it has been moved to extend the meeting 10 minutes. All those in favor?
Discussion,
Aye.
discussion?
For an extension, I don't think there's. discussion.
Yeah, just
It's
the,
a motion.
just the
Not all
adjournment.
motions have
No, just the adjournment doesn't have. Okay, my question is, why did it go from 3 to 4:15 if we're now extending it 10 minutes? It was 3 to 4:15, it got amended to 3 to 4. And now we're extending it to 3 to 4:10. Why did it get pushed back to 3 to 4? From 3 to 4:15?
I'm not sure, and I have no discussion on that. Trustee Glass?
It was because there was a half an hour allocated, I think, on the first agenda to the legal, and that wasn't what we called asking the meeting for. The library director added the half an hour for the legal, and we asked.
So that's why we had 10 minutes for legal.
Well,
Wow.
because that wasn't what we called the meeting for. So.
Okay, all those in,
Yeah, then fine.
okay, all those in favor of extending the meeting another 10 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, the ayes have it, and the meeting is extended another 10 minutes, which will be until 4:12.
I can, yeah. I wasn't one pushing regarding the details of the insurance, but I believe the goal, and another trustee can confirm that, was to find out how many quotes were requested, or what companies did we request quotes from? How many do we have in hand? What's pending? And then some type of a simplified presentation so we can compare apples with apples, so we know which quotes we have out there, what the coverages are, what the premiums are. That's my understanding. Not to resolve it at this meeting, to basically make that as our next meeting, I assume, address those issues and get them resolved at some point. And by the way, I am open to the possibility of dropping some tasking, maybe even a material selection policy, to allow to focus on this, because it's not finished and we could spend more time privately on it. But I'm not trying to overburden staff. But in any case, that's my understanding of where we are insurance wise. I think we need to know what we got in hand, what's pending, and at some point here, have it lined up, because I don't think, to my knowledge, and I don't know that, do we have adequate coverage? Because if we don't, then it's imperative that we do change carriers.
Sure.
Trustee Glass?
So my first item is I would like a consensus agreement given to the library director that we would like to get full insurance coverage like we used to have before October 1st, 5 million liability that's been reduced to 500,000. We don't have full coverage right now, but I'd like a consensus agreement, but we're asking for this as soon as possible and to please go out and get 3 quotes. I thought we had asked for that already, but we got 1 quote. So can we get a consensus agreement to go get quotes?
I believe we already asked that and you did put out 2 more so that we would have a total of 3 and 1 came back negative or something.
You want me to update?
So my recommendation for the board would be to review the financial management policy to clarify authority and role for contracting for insurance. I would recommend that they consider putting some language in for RFQ, RFP for the library district. I think it was extremely confusing when we talked about this in September, I think it was, when we talked about this at length and had multiple meetings. I think it's been extremely confusing about timeline and when we were expecting responses back. I think we do need to review prioritizing insurance in the light of getting this facility project off the ground. I will say that I anticipate there's a tremendous amount of work right now. Things will slow down a little bit once the contractor is selected, once we know more information. And so I think it's, the district is largely protected in terms of facilities and in terms of auto liability and other higher risk areas. It has been my recommendation all along to review things as a mid-year in April. And so that would be my recommendation, that the board review the financial management policy, that they outline a commitment to objective standards and a recommendation by staff to the board for consideration of hiring insurance, and that be more timed at mid-year.
Sure.
Trustee Boss?
Again, I'm asking for the board, not the director. Can we get an agreement to ask that we get quotes in over the next month so we can compare, hopefully 3. We've got 1 that may be requoted or extended. I'd like to have more. Can we get an agreement to ask for this now?
I would consent to that. I'm just not sure that it's possible for the whole process of all the
Well,
information.
just asking,
So anyway, so I consent
can we agree
if
that
it's
we want
possible.
it?
Trustee Henley?
I just want to be sure, do we count iCrimp as 1? And then I've heard Redmond put out there many times, is that number 2? And is there a 3rd? Just so I understand what, are we asking for 3 insurance carriers other than iCrimp? Because I guess iCrimp's not giving us sufficient coverage.
Yes, the board.
So, I don't know what comes in, but yes, I would like to see, if that's if the question is, I would like to see 3 solid quotes that are reasonably easy to compare, that give us adequate coverage. Yes, I would concur.
Trustee Robinson?
I would definitely like to see more than just 1, absolutely. But I also would defer to the director saying right now is not the right time for it. And if she's saying mid-year, then I would be fine with that.
I know that staff has said that because of this crisis, that insurance is going to go up. So anything that we have quoted after now is probably going to be a lot higher. But I guess if they're willing to go through the work for that, I would be fine with that. Trustee Fox?
It's probably going to go up even when they go to finalize. I'm just looking for whatever quotes we can get. I don't want to wait for 3 months or 6 months. I want to get full coverage. We have an obligation, the statutes to give full coverage, and we don't have it. And I don't want to spend time going through a financial management policy and doing a bunch of stuff. Just get the quotes and compare them so we can decide, please.
Director?
I'm just gonna hold again that it is my belief that the board has delegated the contracting of insurance to the director. And so by saying that the board is wanting quotes, then if quotes are achieved, then I will make the selection. That is my understanding of the financial management policy. So I want to make clear that if the board does not address the inconsistencies in the financial management policy, that they may not be achieving what they're hoping to get.
It seems that staff was under the understanding, back in September that it is the board's, duty to approve because the ICRIP was brought to us and asked for our approval.
So I could address that.
Okay.
That was a question that Mr. Boyles and I discussed, and that it was not necessary. But the board had made comments and had expressed interest. It was not, in my opinion, necessary for the board to sign that, and that was also shared by council.
Trustee Harris? Did you have?
Yes, and he just was the one that spoke. As a
Okay, go ahead, Trustee Robinson, sorry.
There seemed to be a confusion, and so I'm confused. And this is for our attorney, if you can answer it. Are we fully covered? I'm not talking about we're not covered enough dollar amount for some particular policy, but are we actually covered, 100% covered? Or is there some sort of, because I know we have the secondary insurance for the employee. Is there in some way that we are not covered insurance wise?
Well, I think the term full coverage is somewhat of a euphemism. You've seen the recent ICRIM updates where they've added additional exclusions, specifically the ones related to materials harmful to minors in the library. There's reduced coverage provisions there. And then we replaced a total denial of employment practices liability coverage, and that provided us a separate set of full coverage, quote unquote. So we have reduced limits, we have some additional exclusions, but I think you could probably characterize what we have as full coverage, but it definitely has some reduced limits in it and some additional exclusions that weren't previously in the insurance that other providers appear to cover that maybe ICRIP doesn't. And so it's really hard to give you like a, hey, we're fully covered, right? Because it's not just there's either full coverage or not full coverage. It's a broad range of factually, you have to analyze what happened. Is it an occurrence that's covered under the policy? Is it excluded? You can get endorsements that add coverage back to coverages that were excluded. And so I would say, yes, we're fully covered, but we have reduced limits and some carve outs recently from ICRIP.
So I would like to invite insurance providers that have given us a quote to ICRIP Redmond. I can't remember. I don't think there was another quote, or I think they denied it or said they wouldn't do it or anything. But anyway, ones that are already in to come and speak and answer questions at our regular February meeting. Do we have a majority consent on that? Yes. Trustee Claus?
I would say, just give a summary comparison. They can give us a spreadsheet. They don't have to come in. Just give us a summary of how it compares with what we have now.
Okay,
Or what we had before October 1st.
I would be fine with that. Trustee Hannah?
Is it reasonable, since the library director sees this as her purview doing insurance, if we just, as our tasking, say, we want 3 quotes looked at to give us coverage equivalent to what we had with ICRIM before, make the decision on which company you want to select, and then I guess the board has to sign off on it because it'll be over $50,000. I'm not really sure now why is the board taking ownership of insurance? I don't really want to make the choice. It's like if there are 3 companies and we got the best price with one of them, we have coverage equivalent to or greater than what we had, I'm happy to say aye and approve it, and somebody can sign it. That's what I'm kind of wondering about at this point.
Okay, so are you in agreement that, or do you consent that the insurance companies could present a
Point of order.
The trustee will state her point of order.
I move that we extend.
Okay. 2.
How much longer is this gonna take?
15 minutes,
5 minutes.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Okay, it has been moved that we extend 10 minutes, and I did look it up, and there isn't a debate on extending or limiting debate, so, or extending the meeting. So anyway.
So there isn't?
There is a
Okay.
debate, because otherwise you would just be
I wasn't sure
arguing
what
about
you
it
said.
forever, whether you were going to extend.
Okay.
it. So anyway, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the ayes have it, and the motion is carried. We are now extended to 4:24.
So, sure.
Who's first?
I think I was out there.
Okay.
I just want to go back to my question is, do we need a presentation made to the board for insurance options? I don't know why we're taking on that job. Again, I'm saying that out of a lack of understanding. If we, which we feel we already do, that we are not adequately covered. And if we want coverage equal to or greater than what we had with ICRIM, then I'm just trying to understand why we just assign that job to the library director with a certain date assigned to it and say, shop for 3 places, get the best quote you can, and present it to the board and we'll sign off. That's sure. At this point, that's what I'm trying to understand.
I think he said that instead of a presentation, we could do just a summary sheet. Anyway, trustee Ploss?
So this is over 50,000, obvious. She doesn't have authority for over 50,000 unless we give it to her. So we are asking her to go do the work of getting the quotes. She's involved, get the quotes, bring them, and don't delay. And we can decide which ones we want and authorize her with over 50,000 to go get it. This is pretty clear that this is our responsibility from the statute. And I don't want to hand it off. This has been, to me, has been botched up because in August, we should have been able to get 3 quotes to replace ICRIM, and it was stalled. And it's appeared to be stalled anyway, but we didn't get it in time. So we had to stay with ICRIM with underinsurance. And then we got a quote, but it expired before we could have the meeting. And I don't want it to keep getting delayed because we get 1 quote and, oh no, we have to wait for 3. And then the first one expires before the second one comes in. I'd like to know right now, what is going on? There's a Marsh, I assume M&M was Marsh and McClellan or something. There's some kind of quote. Do we have any other quotes in the work? Is the Redmond one that we had going to be requoted with a new date? Is there any others? Please bring what you can so we can compare and make a board agreement to authorize you to go spend more than 50,000.
Okay, so it sounds like we did have consensus on getting the 3 if possible within the month. And you said you would be okay with the summary. So we have consensus on getting a summary comparison from the insurance.
I just want to state on the record that I object and that I feel that's a violation of the financial management policy and an overreach into contracting. Ongoing contracts are exempt from the $50,000 requirement. So I'll just state on the record that I believe this is a board violation of its policy.
Okay,
Sure.
It sounds like the way that the council, or maybe I misunderstood it, but that it was kind of questionable that over 50,000 and that health insurance was exempt, but not necessarily this type of
Ongoing annual, so it would be a definition of whether ongoing annual is a liability insurance. Like I said, in the past practice, ICRIP has been exempt from that. The board has not approved ICRIP's policy, so I would just hold that also applies to general liability. And again, I've requested that council and the board review the financial management policy to make sure it's in alignment. And again, I believe this board majority has now just violated the financial management policy.
Sure.
Trustee Pops?
So I've read the financial management policy. I had a number of other changes I wanted to make to it back in July, or maybe it was August. I'm very familiar with it. So I don't want to paint it that I haven't looked at it. It's very clear that iCrimp has been below 50,000, insurance has been below 50,000. So ongoing contracts under 50,000, certainly, because there's a limit there, that is in your area. But this is over 50,000. And this is a major issue for us. And I want the board to be involved. And I do not think it's a violation of the financial management because it's over 50,000.
Again, I would just cite back the job description that talks about the director makes a recommendation on all of those items if they are above that, and typically the board approves those recommendations. So again, I don't understand the need for the board to have, what was it, an analysis or a summary sheet, since they are not making the recommendation. Again, I would like to assist the board in this matter, and so I'm going to recommend that the board consider allowing the director to do an RFQ, which would allow us to receive all potential options for insurance by a specified date with specified criteria so that we can compare apples to apples. And that seems to be the most objective way. I can review whether or not that can be done for a mid-year. I think the board needs to understand that these policies, we got a policy exclusion or denial in certain areas and then reduction. Everything was done by these insurance companies to get quotes, and we had 2 outstanding companies working, and they were not able to provide that in that time frame. It is not uncommon for 8 weeks for it to take 8 weeks for a full quote. They are pulling every driver's license record. They are pulling every vehicle. They are exploring our fire sprinkler and suppression systems and locations and age of facilities. This is an extremely exhaustive underwriting process. And so I think the best product for the library in the best interest is to put it out for everybody in the community to take a whack at it, so to speak, and then we can have exactly what we're looking for, whether they can provide it or they cannot, answered. All quotes received at the same time. So I'm deeply concerned by this process. I think legal counsel should talk about when you receive a sole bid or you're only comparing one and the item is in excess of $50,000. I mean, last week we were talking about $130,000. That was with all combined things, it was. So again, we are unlikely to get a refund, or it's subjective whether we will get a refund for iCrimp. So I don't know why we would, at 4 months, cancel our policy when we have full provisions.
Sure.
Trustee Ploss?
I'm not interested in an RFQ and changing the financial management policy. I want to go out as quickly as reasonable. And I think Redmond was willing to just extend the quote they had for a month. I don't know. I'm hoping they did. Maybe they can't. And if Marsh had something, I don't think there's any reason we can't get something in another month to do this. And by the next meeting, have a summary. I asked for information about what other quotes are in the works, but no, we don't need the RFQ. It's excluded. But we can act like it, go get it. But I don't want to be bound to getting 3 and then only getting 2 and then having to start all over again. I don't know whether any other companies are interested in it. We asked for this back in August. We asked for it again in October to continue doing this. And the only thing we've ever been able to get is the Redmond one that I know of. So I want to move ahead as soon as we can, because I want the full $5 million coverage. We don't have full coverage.
So we did have a quote by iCrimp and we moved on that. So we have that to compare and the Redmond to compare. And I don't remember what Marsh had put out. I hate to ask the director to do this because it sounds like it's a very extensive process, but if she feels it's worth the time, then anyway, but yeah, we did have consensus on getting 3 quotes if possible. In my mind, we already have 2. And we asked her to get a summary comparison of the insurance. So.
I will say that I've heard back from the other company, MMA or whatever it is, and they do not expect to be able to put something together by next week or to be able to attend a presentation. So I'm going to ask a very direct question to legal, and he can choose to answer it or not. Is taking course or potentially adopting, having the board vote for and approve Redmond Insurance next week, adding risk to the library?
Well, I will say that the procurement statutes don't require an RFQ, nor do they prohibit an RFQ. But they do serve as a good best practices guideline related to declaring emergencies or considering sole service providers, and professional services and insurance are exempt from the statutes because of the issues that we're seeing right now, because they're complicated and the timelines don't always make sense, and they do require professional input. So does it add risk to the library to get this new policy? I can't answer that question because I don't have the policy specifics to analyze, and they provide additional coverage. Is there less coverage in certain areas? Are there exclusions matching ICRIMP? We're covered for now. That's great. You've seen that coverage be executed in a recent loss. I would be interested in having a product that is more tailored to the risks that we are likely to foresee in the future related to libraries specifically. Some of them that ICRIMP has excluded, but what we have right now is sufficient. Can we always improve? Yes. Is there a risk in switching? Yes. But I don't know specifically what the director is asking in terms of risk, but I would say yes, because there's always risk, right?
Well, and I would just say too, next week is really unrealistic. I mean, let's just be real. You're talking about, I've already read 269 pages for last week's meeting, and then we need additional information to analyze this. You have not received any coverage analysis from me or from legal counsel because there's not enough information. And so after we just discussed this, I do not have the time to read every amount of all of these policies by next week's meeting. So I would recommend that the board allow either additional time in light of this other insurance company saying they may be able to provide something later. Wait a month, take it off the agenda.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, it has been moved to adjourn. There's no discussion on that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Hey, listen to it. I'll adjourn.
Okay, the ayes have it. We
Aye.
are adjourned.